Hey, my name is Caleb. I'm 31 years old, and I live in a rented house on the east side of Millhaven, Ohio, a small river town about 40 minutes south of Columbus, where the main street has a hardware store, a diner, a barber shop, and a post office. And those four things have been enough for most of the people who live here their whole lives. I work as a glass worker. Not stained glass, nothing artistic. I do residential and commercial glazing, storefront windows, broken patio doors, cracked skylights, busted windshields when the auto shop 3 doors down gets backed up. My boss, Dale, has been doing it for 32 years, and he moves slow now because of his hip, so most of the jobs fall to me. I drive the white panel van. I measure twice. I cut clean. I set the glass in its frame and seal the edge. And when I'm done, there's nothing to see but the light coming through clearly. That's the whole job. Making something broken whole again and then stepping back so it disappears. My days don't vary much. I'm up at 6. I eat whatever's in the apartment, usually eggs, sometimes nothing. I drive to the shop by 7, pull the job list, load the van, and spend most of the day on ladders or on my knees on concrete floors. I eat lunch in the van. I'm home by 5 or 5:30. I heat something up or I don't. I watch something on my laptop for an hour or two, and then I go to sleep. On weekends, I do errands, sometimes drive out to see my sister in Lancaster, sometimes fix something around the house that's been bothering me. I'm not lonely in a dramatic way. I'm just quiet. I've been quiet for a long time, and I've learned to fill the quiet with work, which is its own kind of company. 3 years ago, I was almost not quiet. There was a woman named April, and we'd been together for 2 years, and I thought I knew what my life was going to look like. Then one evening, she sat down across from me at our kitchen table and told me she had been unhappy for a long time and that she wasn't sure I had ever really seen her. Not seen her face, seen her. I sat there for a long time after she left. I kept thinking about what she'd said. I don't think you've ever really looked at me. And the worst part wasn't that she was wrong. The worst part was that I wasn't sure she was right either. I didn't know. And that not knowing was the thing that stayed with me after everything else had cleared. I'm not telling you that to ask for sympathy. I'm telling you because it matters later. That Tuesday in late September started like any Tuesday. Dale called in with his hip flaring up. I pulled the job list myself, 2 window replacements on the north side of town and a busted sliding door on Elm Street that had been on the books for a week. I loaded the van, got coffee from the gas station, and drove out. The sliding door job was last on my list, but I swapped the order because the address was on my way. The house was a narrow blue rental on a corner lot, 2nd floor, with a small front porch and a mailbox that leaned to one side. I parked the van, grabbed my clipboard, and went up the steps. I knocked. Nobody answered for a moment. Then I heard something fall inside, a quiet thud, and then footsteps, and the door opened. She was around 5'4", dark hair pulled into something that had once been a bun, but was mostly coming loose now in pieces around her face. She had paint on her left forearm, a streak of white, and she was wearing an oversized flannel shirt with the sleeves pushed up and jeans that were dusty at the knee. She looked like she had been doing 3 things at once, and dropping one of them every few minutes. Her eyes were brown and a little wide, and she looked at me the way you look at someone when you are already behind schedule and did not budget time for whatever is about to happen. "Hi," she said. "You're the glass guy." "Yeah," I said. "Caleb, from Millhaven Glass." "Right." She pushed a piece of hair off her forehead with the back of her wrist and stepped back. "Come in. The door's back here. It's been stuck since I moved in, and then 2 days ago it just gave up entirely. I almost said I had 2 other jobs I was already behind on, and could I come back in the afternoon? I was tired, and it was barely 9 in the morning, and I could already feel the day being longer than I wanted it to be. But she had turned and was walking back into the apartment, and there was something in the way she moved. Not distress exactly. Just a kind of organized exhaustion, like someone who manages everything alone and has made peace with the fact that one more thing is going to need managing. That made me just follow her. The apartment was small and mostly unpacked, but not quite. There were boxes along one wall still taped shut. A folding table was set up in the corner with a laptop and a coffee mug and several notebooks fanned open. A cat I hadn't noticed was watching me from the top of a bookcase, with complete skepticism. The sliding door at the back was off its track on one side, and the frame was bent slightly where someone had clearly forced it too hard, one too many times. The seal around the lower edge had cracked and separated. It was a bigger job than the work order had made it sound. "How long have you been here?" I asked. 3 weeks, she said. It was like this when I moved in. I kept thinking I'd just work around it. She looked at the door. I kept telling myself things would just click into place. I crouched down to look at the frame. "Doesn't really work that way with glass." "No," she said. "I'm starting to understand that." Her name was Nora. I learned that from the work order on my clipboard, but I didn't say it out loud until she introduced herself about 20 minutes into the job, when she came back from the kitchen with a second mug of coffee and offered it to me like it was a reflex, and then looked slightly startled that she had done it. "Nora," she said, handing it over. "Sorry, I'm a compulsive coffee maker." "Caleb," I said. "I know, it's on the work order." She looked at the clipboard. "Is all that about the door?" "Some of it." I stood up. "I need to pull the whole frame. The track is warped. It's not a 1-hour job." She pressed her mouth together. "I have a call at 10. I can work around a call." She thought about it for a second, then nodded and went back to her folding table. I worked. She took her call, keeping her voice low and professional, talking to someone about invoices and a shipment that had come in damaged. She freelanced something, I didn't catch exactly what, and she was clearly very good at it, because the person on the other end of the call was frustrated, and she handled it the way you handle something you have handled 100 times before, with patience and the specific, efficient vocabulary of someone who knows exactly what she's talking about. I noticed things while I worked. The bookshelves were organized by color, which seemed impractical and probably was, but it made the room look like something from a magazine. The notebooks on her table were covered in dense handwriting, margins full of notes. There was a single photograph on the windowsill. 2 older women standing in front of a house, squinting into the sun, arms around each other. She had a plant on the kitchen counter that was doing extremely well, lush and dark green, and it was the kind of plant that only does well if someone pays close attention to it. She got off the call and came and stood in the doorway between the kitchen and the back room, watching me work. "You're quiet," she said. It wasn't a complaint. It was an observation. "I'm usually alone," I said. "Does that bother you?" I thought about it. Not usually. She was quiet for a moment. Then, "I used to hate quiet. I grew up in a loud house, 4 siblings, always someone shouting something. I thought quiet meant something was wrong." She looked at the plant on the counter. "Now I think I've been overcompensating." I didn't say anything. I fit the new track into the frame and tested the slide. "Better?" she asked. Getting there. Around 11:30, I had the door back in its frame, the new seal in, and the glass checked for any stress cracks from the warping. I slid it open and closed 3 times. It moved the way glass is supposed to move. Smooth, almost silent, like it had nothing to prove. "That's it," she said. "That's it." She came over and tried it herself. Slid it open, looked out at the small concrete back patio with a single plastic chair on it, then slid it closed again. She did it twice. Then she stood there with her hand still on the handle and said, quietly, almost to herself, "It actually works. Did you think it wouldn't?" She looked at me. "I've been in this apartment for 3 weeks, and every morning I look at that door and think, today I'll deal with it, and then I don't. Because dealing with it requires calling someone and explaining what's wrong and waiting and rescheduling and—" She stopped. "I'm sorry. You don't need the whole story." "I've got time," I said. She looked at me for a second, like she was deciding whether that was true. Then she said, "Do you want more coffee?" I had 2 jobs left on my list. I said yes. We sat at her folding table, her on the chair, me on a moving box that turned out to be sturdy enough. She asked how long I'd been doing glazing, and I told her 11 years, since I was 19 and needed work, and Dale was the one who answered the ad. She asked if I liked it, and I said I liked that things were either fixed or they weren't. She said that made sense. She told me she had moved to Millhaven from Cincinnati 3 months ago, rented the apartment sight unseen, which she said she didn't recommend because her lease had ended at the same time as a lot of other things, and she had pointed to a map. "A map," I said. "I know." She wrapped both hands around her mug. "I wanted somewhere I had no history. Somewhere I couldn't run into anyone who already had an opinion about me. And nobody here knows anything about me." She said it like she was still deciding if that was a relief or not. Which is mostly good. I wanted to ask what the other things were. The things that had ended along with the lease. I didn't. I went back to the job list in my head and knew I was already an hour behind. And I thought about Dale checking in at noon, and I told her I needed to get back to it. She walked me to the door. I picked up my toolbox and the remnant of the old track and turned to go. And she said, "Thank you, really. I know it's just a door." "Doors matter," I said. She smiled. It was a quick smile, a little tired, but it changed her face entirely. I drove to the next job and thought about that smile for 4 hours. I didn't have a reason to go back. I told myself that on Wednesday. And on Thursday. And then on Friday, Dale asked me to do a follow-up check on Elm Street because the seal compound sometimes needed a secondary application in cooler temperatures. And I said I'd handle it. And I was at her door by 9 in the morning, feeling like an idiot. She opened it in the same flannel shirt, different jeans. She looked at me for a half second and then stepped back and said, "The door's fine." "I know," I said. "I just need to check the seal." "You could have called." "We don't really do that." She let me in. The door seal was fine. I spent about 4 minutes confirming that and another 10 minutes standing in her kitchen while she made coffee and talked about a project she was behind on and a client who kept changing his mind about what he wanted. I didn't say much. I listened, which I've always been better at than talking, and she seemed to notice that because she kept talking, and at some point she said, "Am I boring you?" And I said, "No." And she looked at me like she was trying to figure out if that was true. "Most people get this look," she said, miming glazed eyes. "I don't get bored by people who actually know what they're talking about." She looked at me again. The same look as before, calibrating. "You're different than I expected." "What did you expect?" "I don't know." Someone who'd be in and out in 20 minutes and talk to me like I was a work order. "You are a work order," I said, "but you're also a person." She laughed. It was short and a little surprised, like she hadn't expected to. "That's the least romantic thing anyone has ever said to me," she said. "I wasn't trying to be romantic," I said. "I know," she said. "That's what made it funny." I went back again the following Tuesday, not for work. I brought coffee, 2 cups, from the gas station, which is what I have and what I could offer, and stood on her porch for a second before I knocked, wondering if this was a mistake. She opened the door before I decided, like she'd heard the van. She looked at the cups. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "I know." She took one. We sat on her back patio in the plastic chair and a folding stool I'd brought from the van. And she told me about growing up in a loud house in Dayton. And I told her about growing up in a quiet house in Millhaven with a mother who communicated mostly in Post-it notes, and a father who had died when I was 12 and left a gap in the house that nobody ever quite knew how to fill. She didn't say she was sorry. She said, "Did you and your dad talk much before?" And I said, "Not really. He was quiet too." And she said, "So the gap was familiar." And I said, "Yeah, the gap was familiar." She held her coffee mug with both hands and looked out at the concrete patio and the overgrown grass strip behind it and didn't say anything else for a minute. And it was the most comfortable silence I had sat in for 3 years. She told me about Cincinnati eventually. Not all of it. Just enough. A relationship that had lasted 4 years and had been wrong for at least 2 of them, but which she'd stayed in because she was good at solving problems and she kept thinking it was a problem she could solve. A circle of friends that had, it turned out, been his friends first and her friends second, and who had organized themselves around that fact when it ended. A version of herself that had been so busy being capable and competent and fine that she had forgotten to notice when she stopped being happy. "That's the part I'm still figuring out," she said. "What it actually feels like. To just notice things." I thought about April telling me she didn't think I'd ever really seen her. I thought about how I'd sat at that table and wasn't sure she was wrong. "I think I have the opposite problem," I said. "I notice things. I'm just not always good at saying I noticed." She looked at me. "What do you notice?" I looked at the plant in the kitchen window through the back door. "Your plant is thriving," I said. "That means you're paying attention. People who are actually not okay don't water their plants." I looked back at her. "You're not as lost as you think." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "That is either the most perceptive thing anyone has said to me in 2 years, or you're just very good at talking about plants." "Little of both," I said. She smiled. The same smile as the first time, quick and a little tired, and it did the same thing to her face, lit it up from somewhere behind the eyes. Not performed, just real. I looked at it for a second too long, probably, and then I looked at my coffee. That was the moment I should have said something. I know that now. Instead, I stood up and said I had to get back, and she walked me to the front door, and I drove home and sat in the driveway for 10 minutes, doing nothing. I came back the next Saturday, and the one after that. We fell into a kind of easy rhythm without deciding to. Coffee on her porch or mine, sometimes a walk down to the river path, sometimes just sitting in her apartment while she worked, and I read something on my phone and nobody needed to talk. She was easy to be around in the specific way that only happens when someone isn't performing anything. She was messy and organized at the same time, funny in a dry way that caught me off guard every time, and completely at ease with silence in a way that made me understand she had learned that the hard way. She started showing up at small things. A farmer's market, I mentioned, where she appeared beside me at the apple stand and pretended she hadn't come specifically to find me. A late afternoon when my truck needed a jump and she appeared with her car and jumper cables before I'd finished making calls because she'd heard me on the phone from her window. An evening when the power went out on her block and she knocked on my door 2 streets over with a bottle of wine and a resigned expression, and we sat on my porch in the dark until the lights came back, and then for an hour after. I noticed everything, the way she held her mug, the way she talked with her hands when she was excited about something, the way she went very still when something upset her, like she was conserving energy for whatever came next, the way she looked at windows, all of them, anywhere we went, like she was always checking whether they were clean. And I realized one afternoon that she was doing it for me, noticing my work. I did not say any of it. I was good at noticing things, and I was less good at the part that came after. In October, her landlord called her. I was there when it happened, sitting on the folding stool on her patio, and I could hear his voice through the phone from where I sat, loud and businesslike. He was raising the rent starting in January. $200 more a month. He said the market had shifted. He said he was sure she'd understand. She said she'd think about it in a voice that meant she was not going to pay it and could not afford to, and was already doing the math in her head. She set the phone down on the plastic chair arm and looked at the overgrown grass strip. "How much were you paying?" I asked. She told me. "And the new rate?" She told me that too. I did the math. "That's more than your current apartment is worth," I said. "I know. Do you have somewhere to go?" "I haven't been here long enough to know anyone who would." She stopped. "I'll figure it out. I always figure it out." I knew she would. That was the thing about Nora. She would absolutely figure it out. And she would do it alone, and it would cost her more than it should, and she would call it fine. I had been watching her do that version of managing things for 6 weeks. "I have a spare room," I said. She looked at me. "It's got a bed in it," I said. "And a window. The seal on the window is fine. I checked it myself." I looked at the grass. "Rent would be whatever you can manage." "Caleb, I know how it sounds." "Do you?" "Yes," I said. "I know it sounds like something I'm doing because I stopped. I'm doing it because you need a place, and I have one. And I know you'd figure it out yourself, and I'd like to make it easier." She was quiet for a long moment. The cat, who had followed us outside for the first time, walked across the concrete and sat on her feet. 2 months, she said finally, "until I can find something else." "Fine. I'll pay real rent." "Fine. And I'll stay out of your way." "You don't have to do that." She looked at me. "I know," she said. "I just wanted to say it." She moved in on a Wednesday with 2 car trips and a borrowed truck. I'd cleaned the spare room and put a lamp in it, the one from my bedroom that gave warmer light. And I didn't say anything about the lamp, and she didn't mention it. We were careful at first, polite, calibrated, leaving each other space. She kept the door to her room mostly open, which I took as a good sign. She cooked on alternate evenings without discussing it, just quietly appearing in the kitchen at 6 with something underway. She cooked the way she did everything, efficiently and without performance, but with a level of attention that meant whatever came out was better than it had any right to be from a rental kitchen with 1 skillet. The first argument happened over a bookshelf, one of hers, which she'd brought from the apartment, listing slightly to the left in the corner of the living room. I mentioned it. She said it had always done that. I said it wasn't a structural thing, the floor was uneven, I could shim it in 10 minutes. She said she'd gotten used to it. I said getting used to something being wrong wasn't the same as it being okay. She gave me a look that told me we were not entirely talking about the bookshelf. I shimmed it the next morning before she was up. She saw it when she came out for coffee and stood there looking at it for a second. She didn't say thank you. She said, "The third shelf is still slightly lower on the left." I checked. She was right. I fixed that too. We stopped being careful around the third week. It happened gradually and then all at once, the way things do. One evening she came and sat on the other end of the couch while I was watching something and just picked up her own book and read. And after that, it was natural. And after that, we were just two people sharing space without the self-consciousness of people who are trying to be considerate of each other. She told me more about Cincinnati, piece by piece, on the evenings when it was quiet and we were both tired, and the kind of honest that only happens in tired. She told me about the friends she had lost in the reorganization, and how 2 of them had reached out and 2 of them hadn't, and how she was still working out which hurt more. She told me that the end of that relationship had made her feel, for the first time, like she had been failing at something she was good at, like if she couldn't make that work. What could she make work? She said it flatly. "The way you say something you have turned over so many times, it has lost its edges." "You weren't failing," I said. "I know that now. But you still feel like you were." She looked at me. "Yeah." "That's not the same thing as it being true," I said. "Some things just don't work, and it doesn't mean you were the part that was wrong." She was quiet for a second. Then, "Did someone have to tell you that too?" "Something like that," I said. She nodded slowly. She was sitting with her knees pulled up on her end of the couch, and she had her mug resting on her knee, and she looked out the window at the streetlight for a moment. And I watched the light do something to her face, pick out the line of her jaw, the shadow under her cheekbone, and I thought, there it is. The thing I have been not saying for 2 months. She looked back at me. I looked at the window. "What?" she said. "Nothing," I said. She gave me the look she gave when she didn't believe me, but was going to let it go. She went back to her book. I pretended to watch the television. The cat settled on the arm of the couch between us, facing away from both of us like a small, furred bureaucrat, maintaining strict neutrality. The thing about working with glass is that it teaches you a specific patience. You cannot rush a cut. You score the line once, carefully, and then you apply pressure, and the glass breaks along that line if you did it right, or it breaks wrong if you didn't, and there's nothing between those 2 outcomes. You spend a lot of time looking at something before you do anything to it. You spend a lot of time making sure you understand exactly where the line should go. I had been looking at Nora for 2 months, and I understood exactly where the line was. And I kept not pressing. That changed on a Saturday in November. She had gone to the farmer's market that morning. She'd started going most Saturdays, partly for groceries, and partly because she'd found the woman who ran the honey stand interesting. And she came home with a paper bag and paint on her jacket sleeve that she hadn't had when she left, which she explained as, there was a woman doing botanical prints, and she let me try. She was flushed from the cold, and her hair had been in a braid that was mostly undone now. And she was telling me about the honey woman and the botanical prints all at once while unpacking the bag, and I was leaning on the counter listening, and she turned around mid-sentence and stopped. "What?" she said. I had been looking at her. I hadn't said anything. But I had been looking at her, and apparently it was not the same look as usual. "Nothing," I said. Reflex. She looked at me. "Caleb." "Sorry," I said. "You were saying something about the honey." "I was," she said. "And then you went somewhere else." I looked at the bag of groceries. The thing about glass is that once you score the line, eventually you have to press. If you don't, you've wasted the cut. I was just thinking, I said, that you look... I stopped. She waited. Beautiful, I said. It came out completely flat, like a measurement. Like something I was confirming rather than complimenting. The kitchen was very quiet. Her expression shifted, something passing through it quickly, something I couldn't name. And then she said, carefully, "What did you just say?" I felt the color come up into my face. I was looking at you and it just came out. I wasn't trying to, I stopped. I was doing it again, not finishing things. "I'm sorry. It was an accident." She was very still. Not the closed down kind of still, the conserving energy kind. The kind she did when something had landed and she was deciding what to do with it. "Say it again," she said. I looked at her. "What?" "What you said." Her voice was quiet. "Say it again. Please." I looked at her face, the undone braid, the cold still in her cheeks, the paint on her sleeve, the way she was looking at me like she had been looking at that sliding door every morning and was finally deciding whether to call about it. "You're beautiful," I said. Not an accident this time, not flat. A fact I was giving her deliberately, with both hands. She exhaled. It was barely a sound. Then she said, "I didn't know if you..." She stopped and started again. "You notice everything, and you say nothing, and I thought maybe I was just... that it was just..." She pressed her mouth together. "It wasn't just anything," I said. "No," she said. "I know. I think I knew." She looked at me. "You're really slow, Caleb." "I know. I've been waiting for you to do something for 6 weeks." "I know that too." That's a long time to sit on a couch next to someone and not say anything. "I was working up to it." "You were not working up to it," she said. "You were hoping it would fix itself without you having to break anything." I looked at her. She was right. Exactly right. That was the thing I hadn't been able to name. That I had been treating this the way I treated a crack in a frame, keeping an eye on it, not doing anything yet, hoping it would hold. The difference is that glass will not hold on its own. Eventually pressure finds the fault line. "You're right," I said. She took 2 steps across the kitchen. She stopped close enough that I could see where the paint was on her sleeve. A small curve of cadmium yellow, botanical, from the woman's print. She looked up at me, and her eyes were doing the thing they did sometimes, where the brown went very warm and direct and let you know you were being seen clearly. "I have been figuring out what it feels like to notice things," she said. "You told me that. And I've noticed you. I've been noticing you since you walked in here with a toolbox and coffee I hadn't asked for and fixed things I didn't know I needed fixed." She paused, not just the door. I didn't answer in words. I put my hand against the side of her face. "Careful, the way you handle glass that matters. Not tentative, just deliberate. Because the deliberate is what makes it real." She leaned into it slightly. And then I kissed her, and she kissed me back, and neither of us was careful about it at all. It tasted like the coffee she'd had at the market, and the cold morning she'd come back from, and the 6 weeks of not saying things. And all of those together tasted like the specific relief of a thing done right on the first try. She pulled back after a moment and looked at me. Her eyes were bright. "I notice things," I said. "I'm just not always good at saying I noticed." "You said it," she said. "Eventually, I said it." She smiled, not the quick, tired smile from before. A different one, fuller, less defended, like something she'd been keeping back, had finally been let out. I filed it away the way I file things that matter, carefully, in a place where I'll be able to find it again. The lease was up on the spare room in December. We didn't discuss it. The room became storage. Her plant moved to the kitchen windowsill where the light was better and where I passed it every morning and thought about what she had said. "I've been noticing you." Her landlord from the Elm Street apartment called in January to say he was listing the unit at the higher rate and asking if she'd be interested in returning. She told him she'd found something that suited her better. She said it in the same efficient, professional voice she used with difficult clients, and she hung up and went back to the folding table where she was working. It was in the living room now, her spot cable run along the baseboard, and she didn't mention it again. Spring came early to Millhaven. The river unfroze in February, and by March the path along it was crowded on weekends with people who had been inside too long and needed to walk somewhere. We walked it on Saturday mornings, usually, with coffee. She had learned to get it from the gas station, the same way I did, same size. And she'd started bringing the extra cup without asking if I was coming, which I was. One morning in April, walking that river path, she stopped at a spot where the bank curved, and you could see the water moving fast from the last of the snow melt. And she watched it for a moment and then said, "I was thinking about something." "What?" "About what you said. That getting used to something being wrong isn't the same as it being okay." She looked at the water. "I spent a long time getting used to things being a little wrong. Not broken enough to stop. Just crooked." "Yeah," I said. "I don't feel crooked anymore," she said. She said it plainly, in the same tone she used for facts she had confirmed and was ready to state. She looked at me. "I thought you should know that." I looked at her. Dark hair in the river wind, the cup warm in my hand, the sound of the water moving through the bend. "I know," I said. She nodded once, satisfied, and kept walking. The cat, who had developed, against all his principled reservations, a genuine affection for river walks, trotted ahead on the path and then stopped and looked back at us with pure impatience. Dale retired in May. He called me from the shop to tell me, said his hip wasn't getting better and he'd been thinking about it a long time. He asked what I wanted to do. I said I didn't know yet. He said he'd been thinking about that too, and that if I was interested in taking over the shop, he'd work out terms that were fair. He said, and this was the most Dale had ever said to me at once in 11 years. "A good glazier is hard to find. The work is about patience and precision, and most people don't have both." He cleared his throat. "You do?" I told him I'd think about it. I sat with it for a week. I looked at the numbers, which were not comfortable but were real. I talked to Nora, who listened to all of it, and then said, "You love this work, not as a job, as a thing you actually love. That's not nothing." She paused. "Don't make a smaller decision than you need to, just because it feels safer." I signed the papers in June. Millhaven Glass is mine now. I rehired the part-time guy Dale had let go, and I moved the scheduling system to something that doesn't involve a clipboard. The van is the same. The work is the same. I drive out in the mornings, and I measure, and I cut, and I set glass into frames and seal the edges. And when I'm done, there's nothing to see but the light coming through clearly. I have learned to say things when I notice them. Not always the same day, but before 6 weeks have passed. Nora has a print from the Botanical Market woman on the wall above her desk now. Cadmium yellow, the same curve that was on her sleeve the morning in the kitchen. She framed it herself with a piece of material she found in a hardware store, and cut with more precision than I expected, though at this point, I don't know why I expected less. There is a photograph on the windowsill now, too, next to the plant. The 2 older women from her Cincinnati apartment, her grandmother and her aunt, and next to it, a new one, small and plain-framed, of the two of us on the river path. Taken by a stranger, we asked, on a morning in early April when the light was good and the water was loud, and neither of us was being careful about anything. I had once believed my life was going to stay exactly the size it was. The van, the job list, the quiet house, the known dimensions of a day that never changed. Then a sliding door on Elm Street came off its track, and I drove to fix it. And the woman who answered the door had paint on her sleeve and a braid coming loose, and looked at me like I was one more thing she was going to have to manage. I used to think the job was to fix the broken thing and step back so it disappeared. The best glasswork is invisible. You don't see it when it's done right. What I understand now is that some repairs are supposed to be visible. Some of them are the whole point,